Number 1. Some villagers were going to celebrate an important wine festival in a few days' time, so they borrowed a huge barrel from the nearest town, put it in the village square, and determined that each of them should empty a bottle of the best wine he had into it, so that there should be plenty at the feast. One of the villagers thought he would be very clever. "If I pour a bottle of water in instead of wine, no one will notice it," he said to himself, "because there will be so much excellent wine in the barrel that the water will be lost in it." The night of the feast arrived. Everybody gathered in the village square with their jugs and their glasses for the wine. The tap on the barrel was opened, but what came out was pure water. Everyone in the village had had the same idea.
Now answer these questions. Number 1. Why did the villagers borrow the barrel? Number 2. How did they plan to fill it? Number 3. What did the villager who put the water in expect the others to do? Number 4. What did they in fact do?
Number 2. Can you think of a sentence in which the word "and" appears 5 times without any words in between? There is one at the end of this story. There was once an inn which was called the Horse and Cart. It had a sign outside it which had a picture of a horse and cart on it. But the sign was getting very old, so the owner of the inn decided to have a new one made. He went to a painter and asked him to paint one, and to write "The Horse and Cart" on it in large letters. A few days later, he went to see how the painter was getting on. He liked the picture of the horse and cart very much, but he did not like the writing at all. He said to the painter, "No, no, there's too much space between horse and and cart."
Now answer these questions. Number 1. What is strange about the last sentence in this story? Number 2. Why did the inn sign have a picture of a horse and cart on it? Number 3. Why did the owner of the inn want a new sign? Number 4. What didn't he like about the writing on the new sign?
Number 3. A young man was called up for army service and had to go to be medically examined. The doctor was sitting at a desk when he went in. He said to the man, "Take your coat and shirt off, loosen your belt, and sit on that chair." The young man did so. The doctor looked at him for a moment, without getting up from his chair, and then said, "All right, put your clothes on again." "But you haven't examined me at all," the young man said in a troubled voice. "It isn't necessary," the doctor said gently. "When I told you to take your coat and shirt off, you heard me all right, so you aren't deaf. You saw the chair I pointed to, so your eyesight's good enough for the army. You managed to take your clothes off and to sit on the chair, so your body must be healthy. And you understood what I told you to do, and did it without a mistake. So you must possess enough intelligence for the army."
Now answer these questions. Number 1. What was the young man being medically examined for? Number 2. What worried him? Number 3. How did the doctor know that the young man was not deaf? Number 4. How did he know that he could see all right? Number 5. How did he know that his body was all right too? Number 6. How did he know that he was intelligent enough for the army?
Number 4. A man had to go to court, and he asked his lawyer which judge would be hearing his case. His lawyer told him, and then said, "Do you know him?" The man answered, "No, but I wanted to know his name so that I could send him a dozen bottles of good wine." The lawyer was terribly shocked. "You can't do that," he said. "You would be breaking the law very seriously, and you would be sure to lose the case." Some weeks later, the case was heard, and the man won it. As he was leaving the court, he said to his lawyer, "My present to the judge was quite successful, wasn't it?" The lawyer was even more shocked than before, and said, "What? Did you really send him that wine, after what I told you?" "Yes, certainly," answered the man, "but I put my opponent's name on the card, which I sent with the wine."
Now answer these questions. Number 1. Why did the man ask his lawyer the name of the judge who would hear his case? Number 2. Why was the lawyer shocked? Number 3. What shocked the lawyer even more after the case had been heard? Number 4. What had the man done to win his case?
Number 5. A man was telling one of his friends the secret of his contented married life. "My wife makes all the small decisions," he explained, "and I make all the big ones. So we never interfere in each other's business and never get annoyed with each other. We have no complaints and no arguments." "That sounds reasonable," answered his friend sympathetically. "And what sort of decisions does your wife make?" "Well," answered the man, "she decides what jobs I apply for, what sort of house we live in, what furniture we have, where we go for our holidays, and things like that." His friend was surprised. "Oh," he said, "and what do you consider important decisions then?" "Well," answered the man, "I decide who should be Prime Minister, whether we should increase our help to poor countries, what we should do about the atom bomb, and things like that."
Now answer these questions. Number 1. What was the secret of the man's happy marriage? Number 2. What sort of decisions did the wife make? Number 3. What sort of decisions did the husband make? Number 4. Which of the two was able to carry out his or her decisions?
Number 6. John was the only son of a wealthy American businessman. Usually he was taken to school by the chauffeur in his father's beautiful car, before the chauffeur took John's father to his office. One evening, his father told him that he had to go to the airport early the next day, so he would need the car at the time that John had to go to school. He said that John's mother, who possessed another car, would still be in bed at the time he had to leave the house. "Well, how will I get to school if you need your car and Mummy is still in bed?" John asked. His father thought this was a good opportunity to teach him a lesson about how hard life was for the less fortunate people of the world. So he answered, "You'll go in the same way as every other child in the world goes, in a taxi."
Now answer these questions. Number 1. Why was John able to go to school in a beautiful car driven by a chauffeur? Number 2. Why couldn't the chauffeur take John to school one day? Number 3. Why couldn't his mother do so? Number 4. What was the lesson that John's father wanted to teach him? Number 5. Do most children in the world go to school by taxi?
Number 7. At the entrance to a big office in London, there was a book which all employees had to sign when they arrived each morning. At 9 o'clock, the manager's secretary, who lived in a small flat above the office, had to draw a red line under the last name in the book, and anyone who came after that had to explain why he was late. Whenever there was a thick fog in the city, the first person to arrive late usually wrote "delayed by fog" under the red line in the book, and then everybody else who came after that just put ditto underneath. But one foggy morning, the first man to arrive late wrote, "My wife had a baby early this morning," instead of "delayed by fog" under the red line in the book. 20 or 30 people who came after him put ditto underneath this, as usual.
Now answer these questions. Number 1. Why did the employees have to sign the book? Number 2. What was a common reason for being late? Number 3. What was the first man's reason on the day this story deals with? Number 4. What meaning did the rest of the employees really intend when they wrote ditto that morning? Number 5. What did their ditto seem to mean?
Number 8. A policeman returned to his police station one evening and reported to the sergeant that he had found an old car with no number plates. "Where was it?" asked the sergeant. "In Ecclesiastes Street, beyond the bridge," answered the policeman. The sergeant opened the report book and began to write. When he reached the name of the street, he began to spell aloud, E-C-L. He looked at this for a few seconds, then crossed it out and wrote E-C-K. Then he became annoyed, decided that he was already too busy with other jobs, and said to the policeman, "Write the report yourself." The policeman had a try too, but after a minute he put his helmet on and began to go out slowly. "Where are you going?" the sergeant asked. "Back to Ecclesiastes Street," answered the policeman. "I'm going to push the car round the corner into Green Street."
Now answer these questions. Number 1. What report did the sergeant want to write in the book? Number 2. Why did he become annoyed? Number 3. Why did the policeman give up too? Number 4. Why did he want to push the car into Green Street?
Number 9. The leader of a band was finding it extremely difficult to prepare for an important performance, because the members of the band were never all present at any one of the rehearsals. Then the last rehearsal before the show came, and again some of the members were not there. At the end of the rehearsal, the leader said to all the members of the band who were present, "I have been making a note of those who have been absent from our various rehearsals. Here it is. He took a piece of paper out of his pocket and looked at it. "I see that the only man who has been hard-working and faithful enough to be present every time is the drummer." The drummer went very red, stood up, and answered, "Well, I thought it was the only right thing to do, as I won't be able to come to the show tomorrow."
Now answer these questions. Number 1. What made it difficult for the leader of the band to do his work properly? Number 2. How did he know who had been at previous rehearsals? Number 3. Who had never missed a rehearsal? Number 4. Why had he been so hard-working and faithful?
Number 10. A man was tired of living in his old house in the country and wanted to sell it and buy a better one. He attempted to sell it for a long time, but was not successful. So, at last, he decided to solve the problem by using an estate agent. The agent promptly advertised the house, and a few days later, the owner saw a very attractive photograph of it, with a wonderful description of its gardens, in an expensive magazine. After the house owner had read the advertisement through, he hastened to telephone the estate agent and said to him, "I'm sorry, Mr. Jones, but I've decided not to sell my house after all. After reading your advertisement in that magazine, I can see that it's just the kind of house I've wanted to live in all my life."
Now answer these questions. Number 1. Why did the man want to sell his house? Number 2. Why did he finally have to go to an estate agent? Number 3. What did the estate agent do about selling the house? Number 4. How did he lose a sale by being too good at his job?
Number 11. In 1861, a civil war started in the United States between the northern and the southern states. The war continued with great bitterness until 1865, when the northerners were victorious. However, even today, many southerners have not forgotten their defeat, or forgiven the northerners. A few years ago, a party of American tourists were going round one of the battlefields of the Civil War, with a guide who came from one of the southern states. At each place, the guide told the tourists stirring stories about how a few southern soldiers had conquered powerful forces of northerners there. At last, one of the tourists, a lady who came from the north, stopped the guide and said to him, "But surely the Northern Army must have won at least one victory in the Civil War?" "Not as long as I'm the guide here, madam," answered the Southern guide.
Now answer these questions. Number 1. Who won the American Civil War? Number 2. How do Southerners feel about this today? Number 3. Why did the guide only tell tourists about Southern victories? Number 4. Why did one of the tourists object to this? Number 5. What was the guide determined not to do?
Number 12. Jean was a very beautiful young girl, so she was quite used to some men showing their admiration for her, and to others being confused and shy when they saw her. One summer, when Jean was traveling abroad, she went into a cafe in a small town, sat down, and waited to be served. The young waiter was talking to someone at the bar when she came in, and at first he did not pay any attention to her, because he had not looked at her properly. Then he turned round and saw how beautiful she was. His face went bright red, and he hurried over to take her order. "I'd like coffee without cream, please," Jean said. The waiter hurried out and came back a few minutes later without the coffee. "I'm very sorry," he said, "but we haven't got any cream. Would you like your coffee without milk?"
Now answer these questions. Number 1. How did Jean's beauty affect some men? Number 2. How did it affect other men? Number 3. How did it affect the young waiter in this story? Number 4. What did he do that showed that he was confused?
Number 13. Carol and Susan were great friends. They were in the same class at school, and they often visited each other's homes at weekends. When they were both 8 years old, Carol's mother had a baby. Carol was overjoyed to have a little sister, and was always talking about her to Susan, who had no brothers or sisters. At first, Susan was very interested in the new baby, but after some time, she began to get rather discontented with Carol's continual talking about it. She also felt a little jealous. One morning, when the two girls were in the school playground, Carol said to Susan cheerfully, "Do you know, Sue, my baby sister gained nearly 200 grams in weight this week." "That's not very much," answered Susan. "I know a baby that gains 5 kilograms a day." "Oh, that can't be true," answered Carol scornfully. "Whose baby is it?" "An elephant's," said Susan.
Now answer these questions. Number 1. How many children did Susan's parents have? Number 2. Why did Susan get tired of hearing about Carol's sister? Number 3. What did Carol boast to Susan about one morning? Number 4. What did Susan do to try to make Carol boast less?
Number 14. A priest who was walking through a small town saw a blackboard outside the front door of a school. It had been washed and put out to dry in the open air. There was a piece of chalk at the foot of the blackboard, so the priest took it and wrote in large letters, "I am a priest, and I pray for you all." A lawyer happened to pass next, and when he saw what the priest had written, he added under it, "I am a lawyer, and I defend you all." Then a doctor came by, took the piece of chalk, and wrote on the blackboard, "I am a doctor, and I cure you all." Finally, an ordinary citizen stopped, looked at what the others had written, thought for a few seconds, and then added, "I am an ordinary citizen, and I pay for you all."
Now answer these questions. Number 1. What did the priest claim? Number 2. What was the lawyer's claim? Number 3. What did the doctor claim that he did? Number 4. What did the ordinary citizen remind them of?
Number 15. George was a quiet, serious young man. He had been studying particularly hard one year, and when he passed his examinations, his friend Jim went to give him his congratulations, and then had an earnest conversation with him. "You've never been to a dance, George," he said. "It's boring, always studying, and never enjoying oneself. Come out with me this evening." "Perhaps you're right, Jim," replied George, after a moment's hesitation. So they went to a dance, and had an enjoyable time. But George drank more than he was used to, and by midnight, Jim had become worried about him. So he said, "Now we'll walk home in the cool air." On their way home, they came to a bridge, and George looked down at the river below attentively. The stars were reflected in its smooth surface. "What are those lights down there?" George inquired. "They're the stars, George," Jim replied. "The stars?" George said. "Well then, how did I get up here?"
Now answer these questions. Number 1. Why did Jim think that George needed a change? Number 2. What sort of change did he want him to have? Number 3. Why did Jim feel worried? Number 4. Why did the stars seem to be below George? Number 5. Why was George puzzled?